A modern hammer lies trapped inside stone, over 100 million years old. These objects are called out-of-place artifacts, and they force us to question everything we think we know about history. By the end of this exploration, you will see the human timeline not as a straight line, but as a story with missing chapters. We will examine a Victorian-style pot found in ancient bedrock and tiny coils of metal buried for millennia. How could a spark plug become sealed inside a half-million-year-old stone? What does a perfect iron cube embedded in coal tell us about our past? Each of the 25 relics we uncover presents a puzzle that science struggles to solve. Are you ready to reconsider the age of human ingenuity? This paradox is the very definition of an out-of-place artifact. The term itself sounds like something from a storybook, but it describes a very real and deeply puzzling category of discovery. An out-of-place artifact is any object, whether a simple tool or a complex device, that is discovered in a geological stratum or archaeological context that makes its presence seem utterly impossible. The shock does not come from the object alone, but from the unyielding material that holds it prisoner. To see why, we need to understand the nature of its prison. Picture a seam of coal deep underground. This is not just a layer of black rock, it is a snapshot of a prehistoric world. Coal forms over spans of time that are almost impossible to comprehend, from the dense compression of ancient swamp forests over hundreds of millions of years. For a man-made item to be found inside a solid lump of coal, it would have to have been present before that long, slow process of compression and transformation even began. The same logic applies to solid granite, a rock born from molten magma cooling and crystallizing deep within the Earth's crust over similarly vast epochs. The idea that a crafted metal object could be waiting inside that stone implies it was there before the rock itself formed, surviving unimaginable heat and pressure. This is the core conundrum that makes these relics so controversial. If the established timelines of geology are correct, then these objects simply cannot exist. Yet people keep finding them. This fundamental clash with accepted science means that such discoveries are often met with immediate dismissal or labeled as hoaxes. The skepticism is understandable, a defense of a carefully constructed view of history, but it also means that potentially world-changing evidence can be brushed aside without serious investigation. To move beyond that initial disbelief, we must look at the objects themselves, starting with one of the most famous and baffling cases ever recorded. In 1852, a routine construction project near Dorchester, Massachusetts, shattered a quiet assumption about the deep past. Workers were using controlled blasts to clear a path for a new railroad line, a task that involved breaking apart ancient bedrock. When the dust settled from one particular explosion, their attention was drawn to a curious object that had been flung from the solid stone. It was a bell-shaped vessel made of a metal that appeared to be zinc, and it was exquisitely decorated. The pot stood about 4.5 inches high and 6 inches wide at its base, with intricate floral designs inlaid with pure silver. To the men who found it, and to the local newspaper that soon reported on the discovery, it looked like a fine piece of modern craftsmanship, something you might expect to find in a wealthy Victorian home. But its location defied all common sense. This elegant pot had not been buried in soil. It was not resting in a recent layer. According to the geologists who examined the site, it had been completely embedded within a layer of solid conglomerate rock, a type of stone that had formed during a period known as the Precambrian era. That era ended around 541 million years ago, a time when complex life on Earth was only just beginning to stir in the oceans. There were no humans, no civilizations, not even dinosaurs. The rock itself was a sealed tomb from a world before time as we know it. How could an object of such refined, familiar artistry come to be imprisoned inside it? The immediate reaction from the scientific community of the day was one of profound disbelief. Some experts declared it a hoax, suggesting the workers had planted the pot as a joke. Others proposed it had fallen into a fissure in the rock long ago and become cemented there. Yet the contemporary reports are very clear. The blasting had shattered the stone, and the pot was recovered from within a single, solid fragment. There was no mention of a convenient crack or cavity, just the impossible fact of its containment. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the Dorchester pot vanished from the public record. After being displayed briefly in Boston, it was reportedly taken by an unknown individual, and no credible photograph or detailed scientific analysis was ever made. Its physical absence has allowed skeptics to dismiss it as a tall tale, while for others, its story remains a foundational piece of the out-of-place artifact mystery. Could it have been a genuine relic of a human culture so ancient it rewrites our history, a culture with metallurgical skills that rivaled the 19th century? Or was it, as many maintain, simply a clever forgery that played on the excitement of a new industrial age? The Dorchester pot presents the dilemma in its purest form. It forces us to ask which is more likely, that our geological dating is fundamentally misunderstood in some rare instances, or that an object of such specific and recent design could survive the inconceivable pressures that create solid rock. This single lost artifact sets the stage for every strange discovery that follows, each one another piece of a puzzle with no clear edges. The mystery of the Dorchester pot was not an isolated event. Just over 3 decades later, in 1885, another discovery emerged from the dark heart of the earth, this time in a coal mine in Wolfsegg, Austria. A miner named Radel was splitting apart a freshly dug block of brown coal when his tool struck something far harder than the surrounding material. Prying it loose, he found a strange, heavy object. It was a nearly perfect cube of metal, weighing just over 1 pound, with a deep groove running neatly around its entire circumference. This object would become known as the Salzburg cube or the Wolfsegg iron. Unlike the ornate pot, this relic was not beautiful. It was stark, geometric, and undeniably artificial in appearance. Its edges were sharp, its faces relatively flat, and that encircling groove looked for all the world like it had been machined by a lathe. The coal seam it came from was dated to the Tertiary period, a span of time that began around 66 million years ago and ended just over 2 million years ago. According to everything we know, no human culture existed during that epoch capable of forging, much less precision machining, a cube of iron and carbon. The find immediately sparked controversy. The natural first assumption was that it was a piece of modern mining equipment, perhaps a broken tool head that had fallen into a seam and been covered over. But the miners and the mine owners were adamant. The cube was found completely enclosed within a solid lump of coal, with no evidence of a shaft or tunnel that could have allowed a recent object to fall in. It was a prisoner of the coal, just as the pot had been a prisoner of the stone. The object was sent to the Salzburg Museum, where it was studied. Initial examinations confirmed it was made of forged iron with a high nickel content, a composition not typical of modern steel, but not entirely unheard of either. The debate quickly polarized. Those who believed it was an out-of-place artifact pointed to its precise form as proof of intelligent design. What natural geological process, they asked, could produce a cube with a manufactured-looking groove? Skeptics, however, began to propose alternative explanations. The most persistent theory, which gained traction in the 20th century, suggested the cube was not man-made at all, but a meteoritic iron nodule. Certain types of iron meteorites can form unusual shapes as they streak through the atmosphere, and some exhibit grooves or rigmaglypts caused by ablation. Perhaps the argument went, a small meteorite fell into a prehistoric swamp that later turned to coal, and the cube's shape was merely a cosmic coincidence. This is where the Salzburg cube introduces a critical layer to our investigation. It shows us how material analysis and evolving scientific perspectives can reshape a mystery. The meteorite hypothesis is plausible and offers a way to fit the cube into the accepted narrative without rewriting history. Yet, for many observers, the explanation feels incomplete. The object's near-perfect cubic symmetry and that singular, even groove remain difficult to attribute entirely to random atmospheric melting or terrestrial geological forces. It sits in an uncomfortable middle ground, a Rorschach test of belief. Do we see what we want to see in its shape, projecting human craftsmanship onto a natural oddity? Or does its form genuinely whisper of a technology that does not belong in its 60-million-year-old tomb? The cube forces us to confront the limits of our own interpretation. It reminds us that not every out-of-place artifact presents a clear-cut paradox. Some, like this iron puzzle from Austria, linger in the realm of the maybe, challenging us to keep looking, to keep questioning, even when a convenient answer is offered. The Salzburg cube's ambiguous geometry leaves us wondering where nature ends and craftsmanship begins. But what happens when the object is unmistakably, undeniably a tool from the modern era, yet it is found in a layer of stone over 100 million years old? This is the precise and startling claim made by one of the most famous out-of-place artifacts, the London hammer. In 1936, a couple walking along a creek bed near London, Texas, noticed a curious piece of rock with what looked like a piece of wood protruding from it. They took it home, and later, when the rock was cracked open, it revealed something astonishing. Inside was a hammer. Not a primitive stone tool, but a hammer with a clearly formed iron head and the remains of a wooden handle, now turned to stone. The concretion of rock that had encased it was identified as originating from the Cretaceous period, an age of dinosaurs that ended 66 million years ago. The implications were, and remain, staggering. Here was a tool that looked like it could have been purchased from a 19th-century hardware store, yet it was supposedly sealed inside a mineral tomb from an era before humans walked the earth. The physical details only deepen the mystery. Analysis of the iron head showed it to be of unusual purity, with very low levels of impurities like sulfur or silicon, a composition more consistent with modern metallurgy than with ancient ironworking. More strikingly, the wooden handle was not merely trapped in the rock. It had undergone a process called permineralization, where the organic material is replaced by minerals, turning it to stone. This petrified wood was seamlessly fused with the surrounding concretion, suggesting they had formed together over an immense span of time. For those who believe the hammer is genuine, this fusion is the ultimate evidence. They argue that for the wood to petrify and become one with the rock matrix, the entire object must have been present during the geological processes that created the stone, processes measured in millions of years. Skeptics, however, offer a very different and more grounded explanation. They point out that the hammer was found in a creek bed, an area subject to frequent mineral-rich water flow. They propose the hammer is a much more recent tool, perhaps from the 1800s, that was lost or discarded. Over time, they argue, mineral-laden waters could have deposited layers of calcite and other minerals around it, creating a hard, stone-like nodule in a matter of decades or centuries, not millennia. This process, known as concretion formation, can happen relatively quickly under the right geochemical conditions. In this view, the petrified wood is not ancient at all, but simply a case of rapid mineral replacement of the original handle. This debate encapsulates the core conflict we will see again and again. It is a battle between two ways of seeing the same object. One side looks at the complete encasement and the material analysis, seeing a timeline that defies convention. The other side looks at the local geology and known chemical processes, seeing a perfectly explainable, if unusual, natural phenomenon. The London hammer does not provide easy answers. Instead, it serves as a perfect case study in how our interpretation of an artifact is filtered entirely through our interpretation of the environment that held it. Is the rock around it a 100-million-year-old coffin or a geologically recent shell? The answer you lean toward depends less on the hammer itself and more on which story of stone you find more believable. This theme of geology versus artifact will echo through every relic we have yet to uncover. The London hammer presents a clear choice between ancient mystery and modern explanation. But what happens when the object in question is so bizarre that it seems to defy both categories entirely? Deep in the mines of South Africa, workers have been unearthing tiny, enigmatic spheres for decades. Known as the Klerksdorp Spheres, these objects are found in deposits of pyrophyllite, a mineral formed under extreme heat and pressure over 2.8 billion years ago. That is a number so vast it predates complex life on Earth by an unimaginable margin. The spheres themselves are small, often no bigger than a walnut, and many are marked with one or more perfectly straight, fine grooves encircling their circumference like the equator on a globe. To the miners who first discovered them, and to many who have seen them since, their appearance is uncannily artificial. They look, for all the world, like miniature ball bearings or some other precision-crafted component, something that simply should not exist in rock that formed when our planet was a lifeless volcanic world. The immediate human reaction is one of recognition. We see the grooves, the spherical shape, and our minds instantly connect them to technology. This instinct has fueled countless stories, suggesting they are evidence of ancient astronauts, lost advanced civilizations, or even artifacts from a previous intelligent species on Earth. The spheres have become a cornerstone of such speculative theories precisely because they feel so deliberately made. Yet, when geologists examine these objects, they tell a very different and no less fascinating story. Scientific analysis identifies the spheres as natural concretions. A concretion forms when mineral cement precipitates and hardens around a central nucleus within sedimentary rock, creating a rounded mass. In this case, the minerals are usually pyrite or goethite. The grooves, experts explain, are likely the result of crystal formation patterns or the immense directional pressures that shaped the surrounding rock over eons. Nature, it seems, is capable of producing astonishing symmetry and features that mimic design through nothing more than patient physical chemistry. This introduces a crucial concept for our entire investigation, a psychological phenomenon known as pareidolia. This is our brain's innate tendency to perceive familiar patterns, especially faces or manufactured shapes, in random stimuli. We see a man in the moon, a face in a cloud, or a manufactured tool in a curiously shaped stone. The Klerksdorp Spheres are a masterclass in pareidolia. They challenge us to separate what something looks like from what it actually is. They serve as a vital counterpoint, a reminder that not every strange object is a mystery that rewrites history. Sometimes the true wonder lies in understanding the incredible, complex artistry of natural geological processes. These tiny spheres from the dawn of time force a moment of humility. They ask us to hold two ideas in our minds at once. We can acknowledge the powerful, almost irresistible impression that they are crafted, while also accepting the scientific evidence that they are natural marvels. This balanced perspective is essential. If we cry ancient technology at every oddly shaped rock, we dilute the truly compelling cases. The Klerksdorp Spheres teach us to look closer, to demand more than just a suggestive shape. They ask for evidence of true craftsmanship, like tool marks, alloy compositions, or assembly that cannot be explained by geology alone. This lesson in scrutiny prepares us for the next category of relics, where the evidence for human intervention becomes far harder to dismiss. The lesson of the Klerksdorp Spheres is one of caution, a reminder that nature can craft convincing illusions, yet some discoveries present a material puzzle that pareidolia cannot explain. In 1974, construction workers digging a trench along the banks of the Mureș River in Aiud, Romania, uncovered something that would become a cornerstone of modern artifact mysteries. Buried under 35 feet of sand and gravel, they found a strange, wedge-shaped object resting alongside the enormous bones of a mastodon, a prehistoric elephant-like creature that vanished at the end of the last ice age. The object itself was heavy, about 8 inches long, and showed clear signs of having been machined or worked, with 2 perfectly cylindrical holes bored through its thicker end. Initially assumed to be a stone axe head, it was set aside with the bones and largely forgotten. It was only years later, when a researcher decided to clean it, that the true shock emerged. Under the crust of hardened sand and thick oxide layer, the wedge was not stone at all. It was a silvery metal. Laboratory analysis revealed its composition, an alloy consisting of 89% aluminum with smaller amounts of copper, zinc, silicon, and other trace elements. This is where the timeline completely fractures. While aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, it is never found in a pure metallic state in nature. Isolating it requires an immensely energy-intensive industrial process called electrolysis, a technology that was not invented until the 1820s. The first commercial aluminum objects were considered precious, displayed alongside crown jewels at the Paris Exposition of 1855. So how could a refined, alloyed piece of this distinctly modern metal be found buried in a layer containing the remains of animals that died out over 10,000 years ago? The thick oxide layer coating the object suggested it was very old, as aluminum develops such a patina slowly over centuries when buried. The mastodon bones provided a geological context that seemed to anchor it in deep prehistory. The immediate and most popular theory among those who believe it is an out-of-place artifact is staggering. It suggests a forgotten human or even non-human civilization with knowledge of advanced metallurgy coexisting with Ice Age megafauna. This idea captures the imagination, painting a picture of a world far more technologically complex than our textbooks allow. Skeptics, however, point to a much more mundane, yet entirely plausible explanation. The discovery was made in the 20th century in an area that had seen extensive industrial activity, including mining and excavation. The most common counter-theory is that the Aiud wedge is simply a broken tooth from a modern excavator bucket. These bucket teeth are often made from hardened steel alloys, but some types of heavy machinery, particularly for dredging or mining, use aluminum alloy components for their resistance to corrosion. Such a part could have broken off during earlier digging, fallen into the pit, and become buried under subsequent layers of sediment. Over decades, it would develop a thick oxide crust, and its discovery alongside ancient bones would be a pure coincidence, a classic case of 2 unrelated items from vastly different eras being mixed in the same geological layer by human activity. This debate is fueled by conflicting reports. Some early analyses claimed the oxide layer was indeed thousands of years old, while others argued it could have formed in a century or less. The object itself now resides in a private collection in Romania, making independent, repeated scientific testing difficult. The Aiud wedge perfectly illustrates the profound challenges of verifying these finds. Even with an object in hand, even with laboratory reports, the context of discovery is everything. Was it truly in a pristine, undisturbed layer sealed for millennia, or had the site been contaminated by earlier, unrecorded human work? The mastodon bones, while ancient, do not automatically date the metal wedge. They only date the layer of sand they were in. If that layer was disturbed, the 2 items become neighbors by chance, not by chronology. This relic leaves us with a frustrating but essential truth. For an out-of-place artifact to truly shake the foundations of history, its context must be impeccable, documented by trained archaeologists at the moment of discovery, and its material must be analyzed by multiple independent labs. The Aiud wedge, for all its intrigue, falls into a gray area where compelling questions are met with equally compelling, ordinary answers. It teaches us that the most tantalizing mysteries are often those where the line between a world-changing anomaly and a simple mistake is heartbreakingly thin. The Aiud wedge leaves us in a frustrating limbo between ancient wonder and modern debris. But another discovery from the American desert seemed, at first glance, to offer a far more explicit glimpse of advanced technology lost in deep time. In 1961, 3 rockhounding enthusiasts were searching for geodes near Olancha, California. Geodes are fascinating natural formations, hollow rocks lined with beautiful crystals, and cracking one open is always a moment of anticipation. When one of the men split a particularly promising-looking nodule, however, he found no glittering quartz interior. Instead, embedded firmly within the hardened clay and rock was a strange mechanical object. At its center was a ceramic cylinder, and through its core ran a 2-millimeter thick rod of bright, magnetic metal. Surrounding this assembly was a hexagonal casing of what appeared to be corroded copper. To their astonished eyes, it looked uncannily like a modern spark plug or some kind of electrical component. This was the birth of the Coso artifact mystery. The finders, Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey, and Mike Mikesell, were baffled. They had not dug this up from a recent trash pile. It had come from within a solid geological concretion. They took the object to a local gemologist, who confirmed the nodule was indeed a hardened mass of clay, pebbles, and fossil shells. Even more startling, an X-ray was arranged. The radiograph revealed that the internal structure was even more complex than it appeared from the outside. The ceramic cylinder seemed to have a metal sheath or collar at its base, and the central rod terminated in what looked like a tiny spring or helix. For those who first publicized the find, the conclusion was inevitable. Here was a sophisticated mechanical device, found completely encased in material that geological surveys suggested was over 500,000 years old. The narrative was electrifying. It suggested a civilization, perhaps not even human, that possessed electrical knowledge 500,000 years before our own recorded history began. The Coso artifact quickly became a legendary pillar of the out-of-place artifact canon, a story repeated in books and articles as definitive proof of an impossible past. But then, a different kind of investigation began. As the story spread, skeptics and researchers took a closer look, not at the geology, but at the object itself. A meticulous analysis by Pierre Stromberg and Paul Heinrich, published decades after the discovery, reached a very different conclusion. They compared the internal structure visible in the X-rays to known mechanical objects. The dimensions, the materials, the specific design of the ceramic insulator with its metal collar and central electrode all matched perfectly with one thing: a champion brand spark plug manufactured in the 1920s. Their theory presented a simple, logical sequence of events. A spark plug from an early automobile or piece of farm equipment was lost or discarded in the dry California desert. Over the decades, mineral-rich water began to seep around it, depositing layers of hardpan caliche, a cement-like mixture of clay, calcium carbonate, and gravel that forms in arid environments. This process can create a remarkably hard, rock-like nodule in a matter of decades, not millennia. Fossil shells and pebbles from the local soil became incorporated into this growing concretion, giving it the appearance of great age. The men who found it, expecting a geode, had simply cracked open a very convincing but entirely modern lump of hardened desert. The original discoverers maintained their story until the end, and the artifact itself has vanished, much like the Dorchester Pot, leaving only photographs and X-rays as evidence. This makes the Coso artifact a pivotal case study. It demonstrates the immense power of a compelling narrative. Our desire for mystery can shape our perception, making us see a 500,000-year-old relic where there is a century-old piece of machinery. Yet it also highlights a critical process, the necessity of peer scrutiny and material analysis. The spark plug identification did not come from a desire to debunk, but from a careful, comparative investigation. The Coso story teaches a dual lesson. First, it warns us of the ease with which natural processes can mimic great antiquity, encasing modern objects in a deceptive stone shell. But second, and perhaps more importantly, it shows that the true pursuit of these mysteries is not about clinging to the most sensational explanation, but about following the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads back to a dusty road in the 1920s. This commitment to evidence becomes our guiding light as we move from the deserts of America to the frozen mountains of Russia, where a different kind of metallic puzzle was waiting. The story of the Coso artifact reminds us that scale matters, but what happens when the mystery becomes almost too small to see? In the remote Ural Mountains of Russia during the 1990s, a geological expedition made a discovery that shifted the entire debate from dramatic tools to microscopic enigmas. While conducting core drilling for mineral surveys, researchers extracted samples from layers of sediment along the banks of the Naroda, Kazim, and Balbaniu rivers. These layers were estimated to be between 100,000 and 300,000 years old, a time when early humans were just beginning to master simple stone tools. But nestled within this ancient earth were objects that seemed to belong to a future era. They were tiny spirals, some no larger than 0.003 of a millimeter, invisible to the naked eye, while others reached up to 3 centimeters in length. Under a microscope, their appearance was startling. They were perfectly formed coils, some even exhibiting a consistent pitch to their turns, like minuscule springs or components from an impossibly delicate machine. Material analysis revealed they were made from metals like tungsten, molybdenum, and copper, often with a purity and combination not typical of natural ore deposits in the area. Tungsten, in particular, has an extremely high melting point, making it a material of choice for advanced engineering and aerospace applications. The immediate and perhaps inevitable question arose. What were these exquisitely crafted micro-objects doing in geological strata that predate modern humanity by hundreds of millennia? The speculation was as wild as it was compelling. Could these be evidence of nanotechnology from a lost civilization, or even fragments of some ancient, sophisticated machinery that had long since crumbled to dust, leaving only its most durable, tiny parts behind? The idea captured imaginations, suggesting a past where technology operated on a scale we are only just beginning to explore today. However, official scientific institutions proposed a far more terrestrial explanation. The region where these spirals were found is not far from known rocket test sites and facilities associated with the Russian space program. Skeptics argued that the microspirals are simply industrial debris, perhaps fragments of tungsten filament or other waste material from 20th century testing and manufacturing. Over time, this microscopic debris could have been washed into the river systems and gradually buried in the sediment, contaminating the older layers. This explanation seems perfectly logical, a classic case of modern pollution masquerading as ancient artifact. Yet, those who champion the mystery point to a crucial detail: the reported depth and condition of the strata from which the spirals were extracted. They argue that the layers were deep and appeared undisturbed, suggesting the spirals were deposited contemporaneously with the surrounding sediment, not introduced recently from the surface. If true, this would make the rocket debris theory difficult to sustain. How could fresh, metallic microdebris work its way down through tens of thousands of years of compacted Earth without leaving a trail of disturbance? The Russian microspirals present a paradox that exists at the limits of perception. They force the debate into a realm where the evidence is too small to hold, too easy to dismiss as contamination, yet too precise to ignore. This shifts the entire nature of our search. We are no longer just looking for hammers in stone or pots in bedrock. We are now considering the possibility that the fingerprints of a lost age might be microscopic, scattered like dust across deep time. It asks us whether the most profound evidence of other intelligences, or of our own forgotten potential, might not be grand monuments, but rather tiny, stubborn fragments that whisper of a technology we thought was ours alone. The microscopic spirals from Russia challenge our very perception of evidence, asking us to believe in a history written in fragments almost too small to see. But what happens when the artifact is not a fragment, but a complete and breathtakingly complex machine, one that was lost at sea for 2,000 years? This brings us to a relic that, while not found in coal or solid rock, represents perhaps the most important benchmark in our entire investigation. It is the Antikythera Mechanism. Discovered by sponge divers in a shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901, the object was initially a corroded lump of bronze and wood, overlooked among more glamorous statues and pottery. It was only years later, as the lump began to crumble, that the truth emerged. Inside were the remains of an intricate system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, mounted in a wooden frame and covered with inscriptions. This was not a statue or a weapon. It was a device, a clockwork computer from the 1st century before the Common Era. For decades, its purpose baffled researchers. Then, through painstaking analysis using advanced imaging technology, a stunning picture came into focus. The Antikythera Mechanism was an astronomical calculator of staggering sophistication. By turning a hand crank on its side, an operator could model the movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses, track the cycles of the Olympic Games, and even account for the irregular orbit of the moon with a specialized gear that mimicked the physics of elliptical motion. This was a level of mechanical engineering and astronomical understanding that historians believed did not emerge in Europe until the development of complex clockwork in the 14th century, a gap of over 1,300 years. Its existence is not a mystery of misplaced time in the geological sense, but a profound technological anachronism. It proves, beyond any doubt, that the ancient world was capable of conceptual and mechanical complexity that we simply did not attribute to it. The genius of its Greek makers was not lost, it was merely waiting in the deep. Including the Antikythera Mechanism here is absolutely crucial. It acts as a vital corrective to our thinking. For every out-of-place artifact dismissed as too advanced for its time, the mechanism stands as a tangible, irrefutable counter-argument. It whispers that our historical timeline is not wrong in its dates, but perhaps deeply incomplete in its assessment of human ingenuity. This one salvaged device forces us to widen the boundaries of what we believe was possible. If the ancient Greeks could build this, what else might other cultures have conceived, invented, and then lost to the relentless passage of time? The mechanism makes the more extreme claims of other relics feel slightly, but significantly more plausible. It does not prove that a hammer is 100 million years old, but it does shatter the absolute certainty that such a thing is impossible. It introduces a vital element of humility into the scientific conversation, reminding us that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. A culture that could craft the Antikythera Mechanism clearly possessed a scientific worldview and technical skill that rivaled the Renaissance. Its recovery from a shipwreck, a single moment of preservation in a vast sea of decay, begs a haunting question. How many other marvels of bronze and wisdom were melted down for scrap, or simply rusted away to nothing, leaving no trace for our textbooks? This one surviving machine is a message from the past, telling us that history's greatest discoveries may not be the ones we have found, but the realization of how much we have truly lost. The Antikythera Mechanism stands as proof that genius can be lost and found again, but not every relic offers such a clear connection to a known culture. Some objects emerge from the earth as complete strangers, bearing messages we cannot read. In 1872, a group of workers digging a post hole near the shores of Lake Winnipesaukee in New England struck something hard several feet below the surface. What they pulled from the earth was not a tool or a bone, but a smooth, dark, egg-shaped stone, just over 4 inches tall and weighing about 18 ounces. It was immediately clear this was no ordinary rock. Its entire surface was covered in exquisite, mysterious carvings. On one side, there was a face with solemn, rounded features. On the opposite side, an ear of corn with a detailed spiral design. Around its circumference ran a series of symbols: a teepee, a circle with radiating lines, a spiral, an arrow pointing downward, and a crescent moon. The stone was perfectly symmetrical, with a hole bored cleanly through it from top to bottom, a hole that appeared tapered, as if drilled from both ends with different tools. The mystery was instant and profound. Who made this and why? It was found deep in undisturbed soil with no other artifacts, no burial site, no signs of a settlement nearby to give it context. It was an orphan in time. The stone's craftsmanship is undeniable. The symbols are crisp and deliberate, a visual language from a culture we do not recognize. The face does not match the artistic styles of the local Algonquin peoples, and the inclusion of an ear of corn while a native crop is rendered in a unique, almost stylized way. The geometric patterns feel ceremonial, perhaps astronomical. The hole through its center suggests it might have been mounted on a staff or used as a weight for a ceremonial garment, but this is only speculation. For over a century, theories have swirled. Some suggested it was a thunderstone, a talisman made by indigenous peoples to control weather. Others proposed it was a treaty object or a record of an important agreement between tribes. There were even fanciful suggestions it was a Celtic artifact left by pre-Columbian transatlantic travelers. Yet none of these ideas have stuck because the stone refuses to fit into any established historical box. Modern analysis has only deepened the puzzle. Geologists identified the stone as a type of quartzite, a very hard material that would have been incredibly difficult to carve with the stone tools typically associated with the region's pre-colonial inhabitants. The precision of the drilling, especially the tapered hole, suggests the use of advanced lapidary techniques. This places the Winnipesaukee Stone in a curious category. It is not an out-of-place artifact in the geological sense. It is not trapped in million-year-old coal. Its mystery is cultural and anthropological. It is an artifact of clear, sophisticated human manufacture that has somehow become completely disconnected from its makers, its purpose, and its era. It represents a different kind of silence, not the silence of deep time, but the silence of a lost story. This beautifully carved egg reminds us that history is not just about timelines, it is about people and their expressions. Its loneliness is what makes it so compelling. It is a single sentence from a book whose pages have turned to dust. We can study the grammar of its symbols, the technique of its carving, but we may never know the story it was meant to tell. This shifts our perspective once more. For every hammer in stone that challenges geology, there is an object like this that challenges archaeology, a quiet testament to the countless human narratives that have faded from memory, leaving behind only a polished, enigmatic stone to spark our wonder. The beautifully carved loneliness of the Winnipesaukee Stone speaks of lost stories, but some mysteries are whispered rather than shouted. In the same South African mines that yielded the natural Klerksdorp Spheres, another, far more elusive type of object has been reported for decades. Miners have spoken of finding different spheres, ones not made of stone or mineral, but of a strange metallic alloy. These objects, often described as being about the size of a walnut, are said to bear not the rough, natural grooves of their mineral cousins, but perfectly straight, machined-looking lines etched with geometric precision around their circumference. They are claimed to come from the same unimaginably ancient rock, the Precambrian pyrophyllite deposits that are over 2.8 billion years old. If true, these metallic spheres would represent a categorically different kind of mystery, one that pareidolia could not explain away. Their reported material alone would demand an answer, for a manufactured metal alloy has no business in rock that formed before multicellular life existed. This is where our investigation enters a critical and often frustrating phase, the realm of anecdotal evidence. Unlike the Klerksdorp Spheres, which reside in museums and have been studied, these metallic versions exist primarily in stories. They are relics of the locker room and the shift change, spoken of by miners who handled them deep underground, only to have them vanish into private collections or simply disappear. There are no widely published photographs, no peer-reviewed material analyses, no precise GPS coordinates for their discovery. Their existence is a persistent rumor on the fringe of archaeology and geology. This presents us with a profound dilemma. How do we weigh such accounts? On one hand, miners are practical, observant people intimately familiar with the substance of the earth. Their testimony about what comes out of the rock deserves respect. A collective, consistent story from unrelated individuals across different mines would be difficult to dismiss outright. On the other hand, the complete absence of verifiable physical evidence makes scientific inquiry impossible. Without an object to test, we cannot determine if it is a strange meteorite, a piece of modern mining debris that fell into a seam, or something truly inexplicable. This distinction is the very heart of building a credible case for any out-of-place artifact. The difference between a world-changing anomaly and an intriguing campfire tale often boils down to documentation. A discovery made by a trained archaeologist or geologist who photographs the object in situ, precisely records its stratigraphic layer, and then submits it for independent laboratory testing, carries immense weight. That process creates a chain of evidence that other scientists can follow and debate. A second-hand story, no matter how compelling, remains just a story. It cannot be peer-reviewed. The metallic sphere accounts force us to confront a difficult truth about this entire field. For every well-documented, physically available artifact that challenges us, there may be dozens of these ghost relics, lost to time, poor handling, or secrecy. Their absence does not prove they never existed, but it does render them powerless to change the mainstream narrative. They become fuel for speculation, but not for science. This murky boundary between anecdote and evidence is where healthy skepticism must engage. It is fair and necessary to demand a high standard of proof for claims that upend our understanding of history. Yet, it is also worth listening to the patterns in these persistent rumors. They often emerge from the same environments, deep mines and ancient strata, told by people with no apparent motive to fabricate such specific details. Perhaps these stories are the echo of a reality we have not yet properly captured, a signal waiting for a clear, documented specimen to emerge from the darkness. Until that day comes, the grooved metal spheres of South Africa remain a haunting question mark, a reminder that some of history's deepest secrets may still be lying in a miner's pocket, unseen by the light of rigorous science. The persistent rumors of metallic spheres highlight a frustrating gap between story and evidence, but some ancient puzzles have been sitting in museum basements for decades, quietly challenging our assumptions. Among the most debated is a collection of simple objects known as the Baghdad Battery, discovered in 1936 at a site near modern-day Baghdad. The artifacts date from the Parthian period, roughly 2,000 years ago. The find consisted of several terracotta pots, each about 5 inches tall. Inside each pot was a rolled copper cylinder, sealed at the bottom with asphalt, and within that cylinder was an iron rod, also held in place by an asphalt stopper. To the eyes of Wilhelm Koenig, the archaeologist who first studied them seriously, the assembly looked eerily familiar. It bore a striking resemblance to a basic galvanic cell, the kind you might construct in a school science project. If the pot were filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, the chemical reaction between the dissimilar metals, the copper and the iron, would generate a small electric current, perhaps 1 or 2 volts. The immediate, thrilling question was, what did the ancients use this current for? The most popular theory is electroplating, the process of using electricity to deposit a thin layer of one metal, like gold or silver, onto the surface of another. This practice was known in the region as artisans produced gilded objects, though historians had always assumed they used a mechanical method like mercury gilding. Could the Baghdad batteries have provided a simple, elegant electrical alternative? Other scholars propose more ceremonial uses. The mild shock produced by such a cell might have been employed in religious rituals, a tangible, mysterious force to demonstrate a priest's connection to the divine. Or perhaps the vessels were simply used for storing sacred scrolls, with the metal components serving a purely symbolic or structural role, and any electrical function was a happy accident of their design. This debate is crucial because it perfectly illustrates the core challenge of interpreting ancient technology. We see an object that looks like something we understand, and we project our own knowledge onto it. The battery theory is compelling because it fits a modern narrative of lost scientific genius. Yet, the lack of any wires, electrodes, or clear examples of electroplated objects directly linked to the batteries leaves room for doubt. What the Baghdad Battery does, regardless of its true purpose, is perform an essential service for our entire investigation. It acts as a vital bridge in our thinking. For decades, it was a standing joke that ancient civilizations could not have had advanced technology because they lacked a power source. These humble pots of clay, copper, and iron demolish that assumption. They prove that the fundamental concept of electricity, the very principle of generating a current from a chemical reaction, was within the grasp of artisans 2 millennia ago. This is a monumental realization. It means the conceptual leap from a simple galvanic cell to more complex applications was not a chasm of impossibility, but a series of steps that a curious, inventive culture could have potentially taken. The battery provides a plausible context, a missing piece of groundwork that makes other anomalous finds feel slightly less impossible. It whispers that the seeds of sophisticated technology were present in the ancient world, waiting for the right conditions to grow. We may never know if the Parthians used these objects to gild jewelry or to inspire awe in a temple, but their existence alone expands the boundaries of ancient ingenuity. They remind us that our ancestors were not primitive, they were practical experimenters, and sometimes their experiments point toward a future they themselves might never have seen. The concept of electricity in the ancient world forces us to reconsider what was possible, but sometimes the evidence for contact between distant cultures is as solid and tangible as a coin in the hand. On the coast of Maine, at a site known as the Goddard Settlement, archaeologists in the 1950s were carefully sifting through the layers of a prehistoric Native American village. This was no ordinary dig. The site was a major trading hub for the Penobscot people, active from around the 12th to the 15th centuries, filled with stone tools, pottery, and other artifacts of daily life. Then, in 1974, a volunteer named Guy Melgren found something that did not belong. It was a small, worn silver coin. At first glance, it was unremarkable, but when experts cleaned and examined it, they realized it was something extraordinary. The coin was identified as a Norse penny, minted during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre, who ruled Norway between 1067 and 1093 of the Common Era. This single tiny object, no bigger than a fingernail, sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Here was a Scandinavian coin from the late 11th century, discovered in a layer of soil in North America that dated to the 12th century, over 300 years before the voyages of Christopher Columbus. Its context was not geological but archaeological, yet it was profoundly out of place relative to the established historical narrative of its time. The implications were staggering. It suggested that Norse explorers, likely from settlements in Greenland or Iceland, had not only reached the coast of North America, as the sagas of Leif Erikson described, but that they had engaged in trade or exchange with the indigenous peoples already living there. The coin itself showed heavy wear, indicating it had been handled for many years, perhaps passed from hand to hand as a curiosity or a valuable token along native trade networks that stretched far inland from the coast. This was not a piece left behind at a temporary campsite. It was an item that had been integrated into the local economy and culture. The Maine penny, as it became known, is a perfect example of how a single, well-documented artifact can force a dramatic rewrite of history books. Before its discovery, the idea of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact was treated as fringe theory, supported by saga stories but lacking concrete physical proof in a verified archaeological context. This coin changed that. It provided a datable, locatable piece of evidence that connected two worlds centuries before the official age of exploration. Yet, even this landmark find is not without its skeptics. Some scholars have questioned whether the coin could have been a later contamination, accidentally dropped at the site by a modern collector, or even planted as a hoax. However, the meticulous records from the dig, which show the coin was found in a controlled, stratified layer alongside definitive native artifacts, lend it strong credibility. The debate around it is healthy, focusing on provenance and methodology rather than outright dismissal. This coin's journey from a Norwegian mint to a Native American settlement in Maine embodies the very theme that connects all our relics. It demonstrates that history is not a fixed story, but a narrative constantly being revised by new discoveries. An object out of its expected place, whether in time or space, has the power to redraw the maps of human interaction. While the Maine penny is not trapped in million-year-old rock, its correct placement in the 12th century soil of North America was, for a long time, just as disruptive to conventional history as a hammer in Cretaceous stone. It proves that the human past is full of unexpected connections, waiting for a single piece of silver to bring them to light. The Maine penny connects two distant cultures through the solid reality of trade. But what happens when the evidence is not a coin, but a picture carved in stone, a picture that seems to depict a world that never was? In the arid Ica region of Peru, a local physician named Dr. Javier Cabrera began collecting a series of mysterious stones in the 1960s. These were not ordinary river rocks. They were andesite, a hard, dense volcanic stone, and their surfaces were covered in intricate, shallow etchings. The images themselves were the source of immediate and lasting controversy. They appeared to show scenes that defied all conventional history. There were human figures riding on the backs of creatures that looked unmistakably like triceratops and stegosaurs. Other stones depicted what seemed to be advanced medical procedures, including heart transplants and cesarean sections, performed with precise tools. Still others showed people using telescopes to observe celestial bodies, alongside maps of unknown continents. Dr. Cabrera amassed a collection of over 15,000 of these stones, and he built an entire museum to house them. His interpretation was as bold as the images themselves. He believed the Ica Stones were a lost library of an ancient, advanced civilization that had coexisted with dinosaurs and possessed medical and astronomical knowledge rivaling our own. This was the ultimate cultural out-of-place artifact, not misplaced in geological time, but in the entire narrative of human development. The stones presented a story, and that story clashed violently with everything established by paleontology and archaeology. The immediate reaction from the scientific community was one of overwhelming skepticism. Professional archaeologists pointed out that the stones had never been found in a controlled, documented excavation. They were supplied to Canberra by local farmers who claimed to find them in caves, but no outside expert ever witnessed an in-situ discovery. When pressed, some of these farmers later admitted to carving the stones themselves, using modern tools and copying images from comic books, textbooks, and magazines to sell to tourists and collectors. The stones themselves showed no signs of weathering in the grooves, which you would expect from objects claimed to be thousands of years old. To mainstream science, the case was closed, a clear and elaborate hoax. Yet, the mystery of the Ica stones persists in discussions for two powerful reasons. The first is their sheer, staggering volume. Creating over 15,000 intricately carved stones is an immense undertaking for a simple forgery operation, demanding countless hours of labor. The second reason is more psychological. The stones tap directly into a deep and enduring human desire, the wish to discover that our history is grander, more mysterious, and more technologically splendid than we have been told. They represent the ultimate what if. What if the textbooks are wrong? What if dinosaurs and humans really did walk together? This desire can be so strong that it overrides critical scrutiny. The Ica stones teach us a crucial and sometimes uncomfortable lesson in our search for out-of-place artifacts. They force us to confront the powerful role of hoaxes and the human capacity for self-deception. In a field already marginalized by mainstream science, a single proven forgery can taint the entire pursuit, making it harder for legitimate, puzzling discoveries to be taken seriously. The stones stand as a monument to the fact that not every mystery is a doorway to a lost world. Some are carefully constructed mirrors, reflecting back our own hopes and fantasies about the past. This tension between desire and evidence is the fine line every investigator must walk, a line that becomes even thinner when we examine relics that are not stone carvings, but impossibly old maps drawn on fragile animal skin. While the Ica stones reflect our own fantasies, another artifact legend has captivated those who look to the stars for answers. Deep within the mist-shrouded mountains of China, a story emerged that would become a foundational pillar of the ancient astronaut theory, the tale of the Dropa stones. According to the lore, in 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te was exploring a series of high-altitude caves in the remote Bayan Kara Ula Mountains when he made a bizarre discovery. Scattered across the cave floor were hundreds of stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter, with a hole in the center and a fine, double-spiraling groove running from the center to the rim. Even stranger, within these grooves, it was claimed, were rows of tiny, almost microscopic hieroglyphic characters. The story continues that alongside these discs, the expedition uncovered a series of small, unusual burial sites containing skeletal remains described as being of a strange, diminutive physical build. The narrative, as it was later popularized in the West, took a dramatic turn. A professor in Beijing named Tsum Nui supposedly managed to translate the inscriptions on the discs in 1962, revealing an astonishing account. The glyphs told the story of a spacecraft that crashed in the mountains 12,000 years ago. Its occupants, beings called the Dropa, were unable to repair their vessel and were stranded on Earth, eventually perishing in those cold, high caves. Their story was etched into stone for posterity. This is the complete legend, a perfect, self-contained package of alien contact, ancient tragedy, and physical proof. It is a story that has been retold in countless books, documentaries, and articles as definitive evidence of prehistoric extraterrestrial visitation. And it is almost certainly not true. When we pull at the threads of the Dropa story, the entire tapestry begins to unravel. No credible archaeological journal has ever published Kai Pu Te's findings. The professor, Tsumam Nui, is not a verifiable historical figure in Chinese academia. The museum that supposedly housed the discs has no record of them, and no independent scholar has ever been allowed to examine the artifacts. The few grainy photographs that circulate are unconvincing and could depict any number of common stone artifacts like Bai discs, which are well known in Chinese archaeology. The entire account appears to be a modern fabrication, likely cobbled together from various sources and sensationalized over decades. So why does this story persist with such power? The Dropa stones represent a fascinating case study in how myths are constructed around the idea of anomalous artifacts. They fulfill a specific and compelling narrative need. The story provides a tangible relic, the discs, a dramatic setting, the isolated cave, and a poignant emotional core, the stranded aliens. It offers a simple, thrilling answer to the mystery of human origins, suggesting our development was guided or influenced by star travelers. This is a powerful allure, one that can override critical scrutiny. Examining the Dropa tale teaches us a vital lesson about sourcing and verification, the bedrock of genuine historical inquiry. In a field already brimming with genuine puzzles, a story that cannot be traced back to a primary source, that lacks physical evidence available for testing, and that relies on unnamed experts and lost artifacts, cannot support the weight of its own claims. It becomes a legend, not evidence. This does not make the human desire behind the story any less real. The longing to know if we are alone in the universe and to wonder if our past holds cosmic connections is a profound part of our nature. The Dropa myth channels that longing into a concrete, if fictional, form. It serves as a cautionary marker in our exploration, reminding us that the most extraordinary claims require the most extraordinary and transparent evidence. As we move forward, we must carry this lesson with us, separating the seductive glow of interstellar myth from the harder, slower work of understanding the genuine, earthly mysteries still waiting in the stone. The Dropa story reminds us that legends can eclipse evidence, but some relics require no embellishment, their truth standing in plain sight for centuries. In the heart of Delhi, India, a 23-foot-tall iron pillar has been defying the most relentless force of nature for over 1,600 years. Known as the Iron Pillar of Delhi, it was erected around 400 of the Common Era, in honor of the Hindu god Vishnu and a king named Chandragupta II. To stand before it is to witness a quiet miracle of ancient engineering. This is not a small tool trapped in stone, but a colossal, exposed monument to a forgotten science. In a region known for monsoons, humidity, and pollution, iron is supposed to rust. It is a fundamental chemical process, the metal slowly surrendering to oxygen and moisture, crumbling into reddish flakes. Yet this pillar, forged in the 4th or 5th century, shows almost no sign of this decay. Its surface is smooth, bearing only a dark protective patina and the faint, elegant traces of its original Sanskrit inscriptions. How is this possible? For a long time, the pillar's endurance was attributed to sheer luck or a special quality of the iron itself. Modern scientific analysis, however, has revealed a more deliberate genius. The pillar is made of astonishingly pure wrought iron with a very low carbon content. More importantly, it contains a high percentage of phosphorus and an absence of sulfur and manganese. This unique recipe appears to be the key. Researchers believe that during its forging, a process of hammering and heating encouraged the formation of a thin, invisible barrier on the metal surface, a passive film of crystalline iron hydrogen phosphate. This film acts as a shield, preventing oxygen and moisture from reaching the raw metal beneath. It is a self-healing, ancient form of corrosion resistance, achieved through a masterful understanding of materials, not by accident. This places the pillars' creators in a league of their own. Their metallurgical knowledge was not just advanced for its time, it was a leap that European ironworkers would not replicate for over a millennium. They achieved a feat that our modern stainless steel industry, reliant on chromium, only began to master in the 20th century. The pillar's existence does more than just stand against rust, it stands against our tendency to underestimate the past. It is a permanent physical rebuttal to the idea that ancient cultures were incapable of sophisticated material science. They were not simply shaping metal, they were engineering its very behavior at the molecular level. This tangible, verifiable marvel reframes our entire search. When we hear of an iron cube found in 60-million-year-old coal, or a wedge of aluminum alloy buried with mastodon bones, our first instinct might be to dismiss them as impossible. The Iron Pillar of Delhi asks us to pause that instinct. It demonstrates that what we consider modern metallurgy had profound, isolated precursors in the deep past. The knowledge to create such a pillar did not emerge from a vacuum. It was the product of observation, experimentation, and a tradition of craftsmanship that has since faded from memory. Its survival suggests that other pockets of advanced technology could have risen, flourished, and been lost, leaving behind only the most durable fragments as clues. This magnificent pillar, gleaming in the sun, is not an out-of-place artifact in the geological sense, but it is a monumental anachronism of skill. It tells us that the true mystery may not always be about finding objects in the wrong layer of rock, but about recognizing the profound depths of human ingenuity that our standard timelines have yet to fully measure. The silent testimony of the Iron Pillar demonstrates a mastery of materials, but what if the anomaly is not in the metal itself, but in the knowledge it represents? A different kind of relic, one made of parchment and ink, poses a question that geography itself cannot answer. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis compiled a world map that has confounded historians ever since. Using sources he cited as ancient, including maps from the time of Alexander the Great, he drew coastlines with a startling claim to accuracy. His depiction of South America is remarkably precise, but the true enigma lies at the bottom of the page. The map appears to show a landmass connected to the southern tip of that continent, a landmass with a detailed, jagged coastline. To many researchers, that coastline bears an uncanny resemblance to the northern edge of Antarctica, specifically Queen Maud Land. The problem, of course, is one of time and ice. Antarctica was not officially sighted by known European explorers until 1820. Even more critically, the continent has been buried under a mile-thick sheet of ice for at least 6,000 years. How could a 16th-century admiral chart a coastline that has been invisible to humanity for millennia? The map itself is an informational puzzle, a case where the data contained within the artifact seems impossible for its era. This expands our definition of an out-of-place artifact dramatically. It is not a physical object trapped in the wrong geological layer, but a piece of knowledge seemingly displaced in time. The theories attempting to explain it are as vast as the oceans it depicts. Some propose that Piri Reis had access to surviving charts from a lost, advanced seafaring civilization, one that navigated the globe during a prehistoric warm period when Antarctica's shores were bare. Others suggest the cartographic data was passed down through generations, perhaps from the ancient library of Alexandria, preserving geographical truths that were later forgotten. Skeptics offer a more conservative interpretation. They argue that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map is not Antarctica at all, but a speculative, distorted extension of South America, a common practice among cartographers of the time who filled unknown spaces with guesswork. They also point out that the map contains clear errors like the misplacement of certain islands, suggesting its accuracy is being overstated. Yet, the precision of certain latitudes and the specific contour of that mysterious coastline continue to invite wonder. This map forces us to consider a profound possibility. What if human exploration, or the exploration of those who came before us, reached much further and occurred much earlier than our records show? The ice-locked secrets of Antarctica represent the ultimate blank space on our historical timeline, a place that could hide the evidence of entire chapters of human endeavor now lost to the glacial depths. The Piri Reis Map, whether a miraculous preservation of ancient knowledge or an incredible cartographic coincidence, serves as a haunting reminder. It suggests that our past might be charted on maps we have yet to rediscover, and that the greatest relics are sometimes not things we can hold in our hands, but ideas we find drawn on fragile sheets of parchment, waiting for the world to catch up to their truth. A different kind of flight lives not in legend, but in a quiet museum display case. Among the many treasures recovered from a tomb in Saqqara, Egypt, dating to around 200 years before the Common Era, is a small wooden object known simply as the Saqqara Bird. At first glance, it appears to be a stylized falcon, a common funerary symbol linked to the god Horus. Its body is sleek, carved from sycamore wood, and it measures about 6 inches from beak to tail. But a closer look reveals features that do not quite match a living bird. Its wings are straight, rigid, and flat on the underside, unlike the curved airfoil of a natural wing. Most strikingly, its tail is not shaped like a fan or a forked rudder. Instead, it stands upright, a distinct vertical fin. This specific configuration, a horizontal wing and a vertical tailplane, is a design principle fundamental to stable flight in modern aircraft. It is the exact architecture of a glider. This simple observation has launched a century of debate. Mainstream Egyptology offers a straightforward interpretation. The artifact is likely a ceremonial object, a child's toy, or a weather vane for a ceremonial boat. The vertical tail, they suggest, could be a stylized bird's tail feather or simply a base to allow the object to stand upright. There is no accompanying text or imagery in the tomb that suggests aviation, and the ancient Egyptians are not known to have pursued mechanical flight. The case seems closed from an archaeological perspective, yet the shape whispers a different possibility. In the 1970s, a doctor and model airplane enthusiast named Kolul Messiha examined the bird and became convinced it was more than a toy. He noted its precise center of gravity and the aerodynamic lift its wing shape could generate. He built a scaled-up, weighted model of the artifact, and when thrown, it reportedly flew a considerable distance with stable, graceful glide characteristics. This experiment ignited a firestorm of speculation. Could the Saqqara Bird be a model of a larger, forgotten glider design? Was it a sculptor's attempt to capture the form of a real, man-made craft seen in the sky, perhaps a ceremonial kite of advanced design? The artifact forces us to confront the powerful role of perspective in archaeology. We view the past through the lens of our own knowledge. A modern aeronautical engineer sees a glider because that is the pattern they recognize. An Egyptologist sees a bird because that fits the established cultural and artistic context. Both are valid interpretations of the same physical evidence. The true mystery of the Saqqara Bird may not be about ancient aviation secrets, but about the limits of our own understanding. It exemplifies how a familiar object can transform into an enigma simply because we ask a new question of it. Without a manual, a blueprint, or a written account from its maker, its purpose remains open to the imagination. It sits at the crossroads of known symbolism and tantalizing potential. A silent wooden question that asks us how we decide what is possible in history and what is merely a reflection of our own hopes projected onto the past. The silent wooden bird of Saqqara asks us to reconsider the limits of ancient craftsmanship, but on the other side of the world, an entire landscape is dotted with monuments to that very skill. Scattered across the river deltas and jungle floors of Costa Rica lie hundreds of massive stone spheres, some as small as a baseball, others towering over 6 feet tall and weighing more than 15 tons. These are the famous stone spheres of the Dikwis culture, and their silent, perfect forms hold a mystery not of misplaced time, but of forgotten intention. Carved from a hard volcanic rock called gabbro, these orbs are not roughly hewn. Many exhibit a sphericity so precise that modern measurements show deviations of less than 2% from a perfect ball, a feat that seems to border on the industrial. Their surfaces, now weathered by centuries, were once meticulously pecked and ground smooth, a testament to generations of patient, dedicated labor by the pre-Columbian people who lived here from around 800 to 1500 of the Common Era. Unlike many artifacts we have explored, these spheres are not out of place in their geological timeline. Archaeologists understand their cultural origin and have even found the quarry sites and unfinished spheres that reveal their manufacturing process. Workers used other stones to hammer and abrade the rough gabbro boulders into shape, likely over many years. The true enigma is not how they were made, but why. What drove this culture to invest such colossal effort into creating fields of perfect stone balls? The spheres were found in alignments, often in groups near the dwellings of chiefs or in patterns that might relate to astronomical events. Some theorize they were status symbols, demonstrating a leader's power to command such a monumental project. Others see them as celestial maps, their arrangements mirroring constellations or solar pathways. A more grounded idea suggests they marked territorial boundaries or sacred pathways, yet with no written records from the Dikwis, their purpose remains an open, haunting question. Their value to our broader investigation is profound. They provide a concrete, undeniable benchmark for what ancient hands and minds could achieve without modern technology. When we encounter other spherical objects, like the tiny, grooved Klerksdorp Spheres from South Africa, the Costa Rican monoliths stand as a sobering comparison. They show us that near-perfect sphericity is, in fact, within the reach of determined human artistry working on a grand scale. The Dikwis spheres force a distinction between what looks impossibly precise and what actually is. They are a reminder that the appearance of industrial perfection can emerge from relentless, traditional effort. This does not diminish their wonder, it redirects it. The mystery shifts from a question of capability to a question of meaning. Why would a culture choose to express its beliefs, its power, or its understanding of the cosmos through this specific, demanding form? These silent stone planets resting in the Costa Rican earth tell us that sometimes the greatest puzzles are not about an object's origin, but about the human dream that gave it shape, a dream we can walk around and touch but may never fully hear. The silent stone planets of Costa Rica demonstrate a culture's drive to shape the earth itself into perfect forms. But what if that drive was expressed not in monolithic spheres, but on a canvas so vast it can only be comprehended from the heavens? High on the arid plateaus of southern Peru, the Nazca people left behind a different kind of monument, one that defies ground-level understanding. Across nearly 1,000 square kilometers of desert, a series of immense geoglyphs were etched into the dark surface of the pampa. These are the Nazca Lines, created between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, by carefully removing the top layer of reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored earth beneath. The result is a gallery of staggering scale and precision. There are straight lines that run for miles, cutting across the landscape with arrow-like purpose. There are geometric shapes, trapezoids and triangles that stretch for hundreds of feet. And most famously, there are enormous biomorphic figures, a hummingbird with a wingspan wider than a jetliner, a spider over 150 feet long, a monkey with a spiraled tail, and a humanoid figure often called the astronaut. These designs are so colossal that their form becomes indistinguishable when you stand beside them. You can walk along a line, but you cannot see the hummingbird. Their full, breathtaking artistry is only revealed from a vantage point hundreds of feet in the air, a perspective the Nazca culture ostensibly never possessed. This single, undeniable fact is the seed of their enduring mystery. Why would a people invest centuries of labor to create magnificent art they could never see? The mainstream archaeological consensus offers several compelling, earthbound answers. The most widely accepted theory views the lines as sacred pathways, walked during ritual ceremonies to communicate with deities believed to control water, the most precious resource in that desert landscape. The biomorphic figures likely represented animal spirits or constellations, serving as offerings or focal points for prayer. Another strong theory suggests the lines functioned as a giant astronomical calendar, their alignments marking solstices, equinoxes, and the rising points of important stars, guiding agricultural cycles and religious festivals. From the ground, a shaman or priest could have used specific markers to track these alignments, making the full aerial view unnecessary for their function. These explanations are rooted in the known spiritual and practical world of the Nazca people. Yet, the sheer scale and the undeniable requirement of a high-altitude perspective to appreciate the designs have inevitably fueled more speculative ideas. The most popular and controversial suggests the lines were meant to be seen from above, not by the Nazca but by someone else. This theory asks a provocative question: could they have been landing markers or signals for aerial visitors, perhaps even extraterrestrial beings? The precision of the long, straight lines, some of which resemble modern runways, seems to lend this idea a visual logic. It is a narrative that captures the imagination, transforming the desert into an ancient airport. However, this theory faces significant practical and archaeological hurdles. While the lines are straight over long distances, the desert floor is not a paved tarmac. It is soft and uneven, entirely unsuited for the landing of any heavy craft. More importantly, it projects a modern technological mindset onto a pre-industrial culture. The Nazca did not need extraterrestrial inspiration to create these works. They demonstrated remarkable engineering skill with simple tools and surveying techniques. Researchers have shown that with wooden stakes and lengths of cord, a small team could plot out these enormous designs using principles of geometry well within their understanding. The true wonder is not how they did it, but why they committed to such a monumental, centuries-long project. The Nazca Lines represent a different category of out-of-place artifact altogether. They are not a single object trapped in the wrong layer of rock, but an entire engineered environment, a landscape-scale expression of belief that feels misplaced not in time but in perspective. They force us to expand our definition of a relic. A relic can be a hammer, a pot, a carved stone, or it can be 1,000 square kilometers of desert transformed into a sacred diagram. Their purpose may be debated, but their effect is undeniable. They are a testament to the human desire to make a mark so vast, so permanent, that it transcends the individual and speaks across millennia. Standing on that plane, you cannot see the hummingbird, but you can feel the presence of the hands that made it, a community that looked at the empty desert and saw not a wasteland, but a canvas for the divine. In their silent, sprawling code, they remind us that the greatest mysteries are often those written not on stone tablets, but on the very skin of the earth, waiting for us to find the right height from which to finally read them. The vast desert canvases of the Nazca speak a language of scale and devotion, but what happens when a relic's entire purpose is to speak in a language we cannot understand? Locked away in a vault at Yale University is a small, unassuming book that represents perhaps the most perfect informational mystery ever created. Known as the Voynich Manuscript, this codex dates to the early 15th century, likely from northern Italy. It is about 240 pages long, filled from edge to edge with flowing, elegant handwriting in an alphabet of strange, curling characters that have no match in any known language. The text is not the only puzzle. Every page is lavishly illustrated with paintings in green, brown, and blue inks, depicting a world that is at once familiar and utterly alien. There are sections dedicated to unknown plants, with roots and leaves that seem to twist in impossible ways, combining features of species that do not belong together. There are astronomical charts showing unfamiliar constellations and celestial diagrams with suns, moons, and stars in peculiar arrangements. Perhaps most haunting are the biological sections, which include pages filled with intricate drawings of small, nude female figures bathing in or connected by tubes and vessels to a complex, network-like system, suggesting a strange and unknowable study of anatomy or a concept of life's inner workings. The manuscript feels like a textbook from another reality, a systematic encyclopedia of a science we do not recognize. For over a century since it resurfaced in 1912, the world's best cryptographers, linguists, and historians have tried to break its code. Military codebreakers from both world wars, modern supercomputers running complex algorithms, and teams of academic researchers have all taken their turn. They have applied every technique from frequency analysis to pattern recognition, searching for any hint of a known language, a cipher, or even a constructed tongue. The result is always the same: complete and total failure. The text maintains a statistical structure consistent with a real language, with word lengths and character repetitions that follow logical rules, yet it defies every attempt at translation. It is not a hoax in the simple sense. The cost and effort to create such a detailed, consistent work over many months would be immense for no apparent gain in the 15th century. This book is a relic of knowledge that is completely opaque to us. Its mystery does not lie in the material it is made of, parchment and ink, but in the content it carries. It is a sealed vessel of thought. In our search for hammers in stone and pots in bedrock, we are often looking for physical anomalies that challenge geology. The Voynich Manuscript presents a different, and in some ways more profound, challenge. It challenges our assumption that given enough time and intelligence, we can understand anything our ancestors left behind. This book stands as a monument to the possibility of absolute loss, the idea that an entire system of knowledge, a way of seeing the world, can become so disconnected from the future that it becomes a beautiful, impenetrable artifact. It is a humbling counterpoint to our entire investigation. We sift through coal and stone hoping to find clues, but here is a clue we can hold in our hands, turn page by page, and yet its message remains forever out of reach. It whispers that some secrets are not hidden in the earth, but are written plainly in a script we have forgotten how to read, a quiet reminder that the past may always retain a final, elegant silence. The Voynich Manuscript's elegant silence reminds us that some messages are designed to be forever out of reach. Yet another relic, perhaps the most debated object in human history, presents a message that millions believe they can read perfectly clearly, a message written not in ink, but in light and trauma on a simple piece of linen. This is the Shroud of Turin. For centuries, this 14-foot-long cloth has been venerated as the actual burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth, bearing the haunting, full-length front and back image of a man who suffered crucifixion. The image is not painted. It is a pale, sepia-toned stain on the very surface fibers of the cloth, a stain that reveals its most startling detail only when viewed as a photographic negative. In that inverted view, the faint markings resolve into a strikingly detailed, three-dimensional portrait of a bearded man with wounds consistent with the biblical accounts of the Passion, from the crown of thorns to the lance wound in the side. For the faithful, this is not an artifact, it is a direct witness, a divine imprint of a moment that changed the world, For science, it is one of the most perplexing material puzzles ever encountered. The controversy reached a fever pitch in the late 1980s, when the Vatican permitted a small sample of the shroud to be subjected to radiocarbon dating by 3 independent laboratories. The results, published in 1989, were seemingly definitive. The linen fibers dated to between 1260 and 1390 of the Common Era, squarely within the medieval period. To many, this was the final word, proving the shroud was an elaborate, if inexplicably crafted, medieval forgery. Yet for others, the scientific story was far from over. The nature of the image itself defies all simple explanations. How was it created? The coloration is only on the very topmost fibers of each thread, with no capillary action that would indicate a liquid pigment. It has the properties of a scorch, but one without any directionality or charring, as if the image was produced by a brief, intense burst of radiant energy projecting a 3-dimensional form. Countless attempts to replicate the shroud's exact properties using medieval techniques, from paints and acids to powdered pigments and heated statues, have all fallen short. They can mimic the superficial look, but not the precise chemical and physical characteristics of the original. This has led to alternative theories about the carbon dating, suggesting the sample may have been contaminated by a fire in the 1500s that damaged the cloth, or by microbial growth on the fibers that skewed the results. The debate is a perfect storm where faith, history, and anomalous science collide. It shows us that an object's truth can reside in multiple realms at once. Historically, the carbon date places it in the Middle Ages. Materially, its image formation process remains an unsolved scientific enigma. Spiritually, for believers, its provenance transcends both of those frames entirely. The Shroud of Turin, therefore, becomes more than a relic, it becomes a mirror. We look at it and see reflected back our own deepest questions about the boundaries of the possible. Is it the ultimate evidence of a miracle, a physical remnant of an event that defies material laws? Or is it the ultimate evidence of human ingenuity, a masterpiece of devotional art created by an unknown medieval genius using a lost technique that somehow prefigured the concept of photography by centuries? It forces a humbling admission. Even with our most advanced tools, some objects resist a single, comfortable explanation. They exist in the liminal space between what we can prove and what we feel we know, a space where mystery itself becomes the most enduring artifact of all. The Shroud of Turin asks us to hold faith and science in a single thought, a challenge that feels uniquely human. Yet some modern mysteries arrive not from faith, but from the cold, precise data of machines scanning the dark. In 2011, a Swedish ocean exploration team named Ocean X was using side-scan sonar to survey the floor of the Baltic Sea, a vast, silent world between Sweden and Finland. Their goal was to locate historic shipwrecks, but what their instruments recorded was something no one expected. On the monitor, emerging from the murky depths nearly 300 feet below, was a shape that defied the usual contours of the seabed. It was a massive, circular object, roughly 60 meters in diameter, resting on a long, tapered pillar or trail. Its silhouette was not jagged like a rock formation, but unnaturally smooth and geometric. Most strikingly, it bore a series of straight lines and right angles across its surface, features that looked, to many who saw the first images, uncannily like ramps, staircases, or even landing gear. The internet quickly christened it the Baltic Sea Anomaly, and a more pop culture-friendly comparison was inevitable. With its disc-like main body and protruding structures, it bore a striking resemblance to the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, a fictional starship frozen in the deep. The immediate speculation was as vast as the sea itself. Could this be a sunken, unidentified craft, a piece of ancient, unknown architecture, or even a lost Nazi anti-submarine device from the Second World War. The team reported further strange occurrences when they dove to the site with remote-operated vehicles. They claimed their electronic equipment would malfunction when directly above the object, only to resume normal function when they moved away, as if something was generating localized electromagnetic interference. This detail, though anecdotal, added a layer of technological mystique to the physical shape. It suggested the object was not just an odd rock, but something that actively interacted with the tools of modern exploration. The scientific community, particularly geologists, responded with a much more terrestrial explanation. They pointed to the region's glacial history. The Baltic Sea basin was carved and scoured by immense ice sheets during the last ice age. As these glaciers retreated, they deposited vast amounts of debris and carved unusual formations into the bedrock. Experts proposed that the anomaly is most likely a glacial erratic, a large boulder transported by ice, or a moraine deposit, a pile of rock and sediment left behind by a glacier. The straight lines and angles could be explained by natural fracturing, and the peculiar way sonar sound waves reflect off certain types of rock formations at that depth and angle. The pillar it seems to rest on could be a common glacial feature called a glacial drumlin. In this view, the anomaly is a spectacular example of pareidolia on a grand scale, where our pattern-seeking minds, aided by low-resolution sonar imagery, assemble a familiar technological shape from a random natural sculpture. This modern discovery represents a fascinating evolution in our search for the out-of-place. For centuries, these mysteries were unearthed by chance, a miner's pickaxe or a farmer's plow striking the impossible. The Baltic Sea Anomaly was found not by hand but by algorithm and acoustic pulse. It signifies that the age of discovering potential out-of-place artifacts is far from over. Our new tools, from deep-sea sonar to satellite imagery, are scanning previously inaccessible realms, and they are certain to reveal new enigmas that challenge our perception. The anomaly sits in a frustrating middle ground, a digital ghost that is difficult to dismiss yet impossible to verify without prohibitively expensive and complex excavation. It asks a new kind of question. In an era where we can map the ocean floor with such detail, how do we distinguish a truly anomalous structure from a breathtaking trick of nature and technology? This sonar image from the cold Baltic depths reminds us that the unknown is not confined to the distant past or to solid rock. It is still out there, waiting in the dark, for our next generation of tools to illuminate shapes we may not yet understand. A different kind of blueprint is carved not on parchment, but in dark stone. In Colombia, a strange artifact known as the genetic disc has surfaced in private collections, presenting an image so specific it seems to leap from a modern biology textbook. The object is a circular disc about 22 centimeters in diameter, crafted from a hard, black stone called lyddite. Its surface is divided into sections, each filled with intricate carvings that tell a startling story. One section clearly shows a sperm cell approaching an ovum, depicting the moment of fertilization. Another shows a sequence of a developing fetus, from a small cluster of cells to a more recognizable form with head and limb buds. Other carvings depict adult human figures, but with highly unusual, elongated skull shapes, unlike any known indigenous artistic tradition from the region. The narrative implied by the disc is profound. It suggests that its creators possessed a detailed, microscopic understanding of human reproduction and embryonic development, knowledge that aligns perfectly with modern embryology, but was not formally established in science until the invention of powerful microscopes centuries later. If this disc were a genuine pre-Columbian artifact, it would be one of the most revolutionary out-of-place objects ever discovered, indicating a lost civilization with scientific insight rivaling our own. The immediate and overwhelming problem, however, is one of provenance. Unlike artifacts excavated by archaeologists, the genetic disk has no documented discovery context. It did not emerge from a sealed tomb or a stratified archaeological site witnessed by experts. It appeared on the antiquities market, its history traced only to the claims of its sellers. This lack of a clear chain of custody makes verification nearly impossible. Without knowing precisely where it was found, what layer of earth held it, or what other objects lay beside it, scientists have no way to date it independently or confirm its ancient origin. The material itself, lyddite, is a durable stone that cannot be dated using radiocarbon methods, as it contains no organic material. Stylistically, the carvings are crisp and show little of the weathering one might expect from an object claimed to be thousands of years old. The biological imagery is rendered with a clinical precision that feels entirely modern, lacking the symbolic or mythological framing common in authentic ancient art. For these reasons, most mainstream archaeologists and historians classify the genetic disk as almost certainly a modern creation, a 20th century piece of art or curiosity designed to look ancient. This assessment transforms the disk from a historical mystery into a different kind of case study, one far more relevant to our digital age. It serves as a crucial cautionary tale about the modern creation of ancient mysteries. The motivations behind such objects can vary. Sometimes they are crafted for simple commercial gain, sold as rare antiquities to collectors eager to own a piece of the unexplained. Other times, they may be created to support a specific ideological or alternative historical narrative, providing tangible proof for theories about lost advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial influence. The genetic disk fits a recognizable pattern. It takes a piece of modern scientific knowledge, embryology, and projects it backward in time, creating a satisfying loop where ancient wisdom seems to predict modern discovery. This loop is deeply appealing as it suggests a hidden thread of advanced knowledge running through history, waiting to be rediscovered. The danger lies in how convincingly such objects can be presented. A well-made artifact, coupled with a compelling story about its discovery, can bypass critical scrutiny and enter the popular imagination as fact. It feeds a hunger for wonder, but in doing so, it can muddy the waters for legitimate, puzzling discoveries that deserve serious investigation. The disk reminds us that in a world fascinated by the anomalous, the ability to ask tough questions about provenance is our most important tool. It teaches that sometimes the most significant lesson an artifact can offer is not about the past, but about our own desire to find patterns and meaning, even where none may exist. The genetic disk warns us of modern creations masquerading as ancient proof, but within the walls of a verified Egyptian temple, a different kind of image invites a debate that has raged for decades. Carved into the stone of the Hathor Temple at Dendera is a bas-relief that seems to flicker with anachronistic light. The scene is specific and strangely technical. Two figures are shown kneeling or standing, holding up what looks like a giant, elongated glass bulb. Inside this bulb, a snake stretches its body in a straight line from one end to the other. This serpentine form is held aloft by a pair of arms emerging from a base, and the entire bulbous object is connected by a thick cable to a box, upon which sits a figure of the air god, Hapi. To a modern eye, the interpretation feels instantaneous. It looks like a light bulb. The bulb is the glass enclosure, the snake is the glowing filament, the cable is an insulated wire, and the box is a power source or battery, perhaps even a version of the Baghdad Battery we discussed earlier. The kneeling figures are the technicians operating or maintaining this device. The implication is as shocking as it is clear. Ancient Egypt, according to this view, had electric lighting. Mainstream Egyptology offers a profoundly different and deeply symbolic reading. Experts explain that the scene is not a technical diagram, but a religious one, rich with mythological meaning. The bulb-shaped object is not glass but a lotus flower, a powerful symbol of creation and rebirth. The snake emerging from it is not a filament but a representation of the god Harsomptus, a serpent deity associated with life force and divinity. The arms holding the snake are those of the god Hare, symbolizing infinity. The cable is not a wire but a stylized lotus stem, and the box is a jed pillar, a symbol of stability and the backbone of the god Osiris. The entire tableau, located in a crypt dedicated to the mysteries of Hathor, is a depiction of a creation myth, showing the moment the world emerged from the primordial waters, symbolized by the lotus and the serpent. It is a spiritual blueprint, not an electrical one. This collision of interpretations makes the Dendera relief a perfect case study in how we see the past. Our perspective is filtered through the lens of our own world. Living in an age illuminated by electricity, we naturally see a light bulb. An ancient Egyptian priest, living in a world animated by gods and symbolic narratives, saw the miraculous birth of cosmic order. Neither view is wrong in its own context, but they speak to entirely different ways of understanding reality. The mystery here is not necessarily about a lost technology, but about the gap between ancient intention and modern perception. Could the Egyptians have been encoding a practical truth within a sacred symbol? It is possible, but there is no corroborating evidence, no buried generators or glass bulbs found in tombs, no soot-free ceilings in the deepest chambers that would necessitate such lighting. The symbolic interpretation fits seamlessly into the vast, documented tapestry of Egyptian religion that covers every other inch of the temple walls. The Dendera light ultimately asks us to consider the purpose of such artifacts. Is there value in what they might reveal about advanced ancient technology, or in what they unquestionably reveal about the sophisticated and complex inner world of the people who made them? The relief is a masterpiece of symbolic communication, a stone page from a spiritual text. To reduce it to merely a schematic for a light bulb might be to miss its deeper, more human meaning. It represents a culture that explained the universe through story and symbol, carving their understanding of life, death, and creation into the very walls meant to last for eternity. In that sense, the real power emanating from this carving is not electrical, but artistic and theological, a different kind of energy that has illuminated human thought for millennia. That desire to carve meaning into the very bones of the earth finds its most monumental expression on the most isolated inhabited island on the planet. Far out in the vast blue expanse of the Pacific, over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent, lies Rapa Nui, known to the world as Easter Island. And there, gazing inland with silent, implacable authority, stand the Moai. These are not mere heads as often depicted, but colossal full-body figures, some standing over 30 feet tall and weighing more than 80 tons. They were carved from solid volcanic tuff in a single quarry, then somehow moved across miles of rugged terrain to stone platforms called ahu that ring the coastline. This is our 25th and final relic, and in many ways it is the ultimate human-made out-of-place artifact. Its mystery is not about being trapped in the wrong geological layer, but about being an achievement that seems, at first glance, to be in the wrong chapter of human capability. How did a small Polynesian society, arriving on the island around 1200 of the Common Era, with no metal tools, no wheels, and no draft animals, accomplish such a staggering feat of engineering? The scale is almost incomprehensible. Hundreds of these statues were created, with the largest, named El Gigante, still lying unfinished in the quarry, a behemoth weighing an estimated 270 tons. To stand at the quarry of Rono Raraku is to feel the weight of the ambition. Dozens of moai in various stages of completion are still embedded in the rock, as if the island itself is giving birth to stone giants. The most haunting are those that were completed but never left, standing sentinel on the quarry slopes, their blind eyes staring out over a project that was, for reasons lost to time, suddenly abandoned. The central puzzle has always been transportation. How do you move an 80-ton block of stone across several miles of uneven, hilly ground? For generations, this question fueled wild speculation, from tales of ancient magic to theories of extraterrestrial assistance. It seemed an impossible task, a relic of effort that defied the tools available. In recent decades, however, anthropological research and ingenious experimentation have offered a beautifully human answer. Archaeologists working with the descendants of the Rapa Nui people tested a theory rooted in oral tradition. They proposed that the Moai were not dragged horizontally but walked. Using 3 strong ropes tied to a large replica statue, teams demonstrated how a rocking, side-to-side motion could make the Moai appear to walk upright across the landscape. With coordinated pulls, the statue could be nudged forward, its center of gravity carefully managed, moving it several hundred meters in a day. Another compelling experiment showed how a sledge made from local timber, lubricated with sweet potatoes, could also transport the massive figures. These methods are not magic, they are physics, leverage, and immense communal effort. They show that what looks impossible from a distance becomes achievable with ingenuity, patience, and a unified purpose. This revelation does not diminish the Moai, it elevates them. They are no longer mysterious because of how they were moved, but because of why. Why did this society dedicate generations of labor and vast resources to this single, overwhelming pursuit? The answer lies in their spiritual and social world. The Moai are not solitary monuments. They are representations of deified ancestors, their backs to the sea, facing and watching over the living communities of the island. They were believed to hold mana, spiritual power that would protect and nurture the people. Erecting a larger, more imposing Moai was an act of devotion, a display of a clan's strength and connection to the divine. This understanding transforms the Moai from a logistical puzzle into a profound cultural statement. They are the ultimate expression of a people's identity, their relationship with their ancestors, and their determination to leave a mark that would echo through the ages. In this sense, the Moai are a perfect, fitting conclusion to our journey. They embody the core theme we have seen again and again. Not that ancient peoples had impossible technology, but that they possessed a depth of ingenuity, purpose, and communal will that we are only beginning to fully appreciate. They were not limited by what we assume they lacked. They worked with what they had, and with a shared vision they moved mountains, or rather, they made mountains walk. The silent giants of Rapa Nui remind us that the greatest relics are not those that defy explanation, but those that, once understood, speak most powerfully about the human spirit's capacity to shape its world, to reach for the monumental, and to carve its memory in stone against the endless sea of time. From the Dorchester Pot to the colossal Moai, our journey through these 25 relics paints a portrait of human history that is wonderfully, frustratingly incomplete. We have seen objects that defy their geological prisons, tools that whisper of impossible timelines, and carvings that speak in languages we have forgotten how to read. Some of these finds are almost certainly hoaxes, clever products of human mischief or wishful thinking. Others are likely misidentifications, where our pattern-seeking minds see a machine in a strangely shaped stone, or where modern debris has tricked us with a convincing coat of mineral disguise. A few may even be genuine anomalies that future science will one day explain through processes we do not yet comprehend. Yet, a stubborn handful refuse to fit neatly into any of these boxes. They linger in that gray area between mistake and miracle, poking persistent holes in our comfortable, linear story of human progress. They are the splinters in the timeline, the artifacts that simply should not be, and their greatest power is not in the answers they provide, but in the profound questions they force us to ask. They challenge the very foundation of how we understand our past, urging us to stay humble in the face of what we do not know. The past is not a closed book with a definitive final chapter. It is more like a vast, fragmented manuscript where storms have scattered the pages and time has faded the ink. These relics are the surviving paragraphs, some clear, some cryptic, waiting for us to piece together their true narrative. Whether they are evidence of civilizations lost to cataclysm and time, curious visitors from other realms of possibility, or simply natural wonders we have not yet learned to see correctly, their ultimate purpose is the same. They compel us to keep looking, to keep digging both in the earth and in our own assumptions, to remain curious, skeptical, and open to wonder. What waits for us next, hidden in a seam of coal a mile underground, or locked within a piece of granite older than the dinosaurs? The search for that next discovery, the next piece of the puzzle, is the very engine of human exploration. It is what drives us to turn the next page, scan the next sonar image, or examine the next strange stone. If this journey into the shadowy corners of history has sparked your own curiosity, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the world's greatest enigmas. And we would love to hear from you. Which of these 25 relics lingers in your mind? Which mystery makes you question everything you thought you knew about the story of us? The conversation, like the search, is just beginning.